I bought the land to get away from it all. 5 peaceful acres tucked against a slow-moving creek, with a stand of pine trees on the south end and no neighbors within shouting distance. After 20 years in law enforcement, most of them spent in city precincts, dealing with drug busts, domestic calls, and bureaucratic nonsense, I needed an escape. Not a vacation, something permanent, something mine. So when I found this rural property, an hour outside of Millstone, I didn't hesitate. It wasn't much: a gravel driveway, a small cabin I'd later restore, and a rusted metal shed I converted into a tool shop, but it was mine. No city noise, no politics, no people telling me where I could hang a flag or how long my grass should be, and most importantly, no HOA. Or so I thought. The first red flag came one quiet Tuesday morning. I walked up my driveway to retrieve a package from the drop box near the road, and when I noticed something odd. A bright orange paper slipped, tucked into the hinge of my gate. At first glance I figured it was a flyer someone advertising tree trimming or gravel work, but as I pulled it free, I saw the bold letters. Notice of violation, unauthorized structure. I actually laughed. There's no homeowners association out here. This road isn't even maintained by the county. The only unauthorized structure I had was the small sedan old aluminum frame with a fresh coat of paint and reinforced locks for my power tools. I built it on a legal foundation. Poured the concrete slab myself over a long weekend. The letterhead said, Lake Ridge Rural Association, Enforcement Division. I blinked. I'd never heard of any Lake Ridge Association. The closest thing to government out here was the county assessor, who stopped by once a year to check land values. I shrugged and tossed the notice into the trash on my way back inside. Probably a scam or some confused neighbor. Either way, I figured that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, there were 3 more. One was stapled to a tree on the edge of my property, another taped to my mailbox, the third stuffed under the windshield wiper of my truck. They all said the same thing: unauthorized structure. Failure to comply will result in action. This time, the notices were signed Kara Templeton, Acting President, Lake Ridge Rural Association. A name I'd never heard before. Later that evening I drove down the gravel road to speak with Dave, an old-timer who'd lived here since the 60s. Vietnam vet, cattle farmer, and the closest thing we had to a neighborhood historian. He answered the door with a beer in hand and a half. You got the orange paper, didn't you? I nodded. You know what this is? Dave chuckled and leaned on the doorframe. That's Kara. She moved in 6 months ago, 2 parcels down. City woman. Thinks she can turn this road into a gated community. Started knocking on doors talking about forming an HOA. Most of us told her to buzz off, but she got a couple retirees to sign a little charter. I frowned. So this isn't real. She doesn't have legal authority. Not a drop, Dave said. This is private land. The county doesn't even plow out here, but she's been puffing her chest like she's the mayor of Lake Ridge. Made up her own logo, printed those fake citations. And now she's been bothering everyone who didn't join her fantasy club. That explained a lot, but I still didn't appreciate someone posting threats on my land. What's she hoping to accomplish? I asked. Dave scratched his beard. Control. Some folks just need it like air. I guess pretending to be queen of the countryside gives her purpose. I thanked Dave and drove home, thinking it'd die down. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't have predicted, is that Kara wasn't just playing pretend. She was about to take things a whole lot further. She wasn't going to wait for me to respond. She was going to act. And that's when things turned from annoying to criminal. It started before dawn, with the unmistakable rumble of heavy machinery echoing through the valley. I bolted upright in bed, the vibration subtle but unmistakable, a low mechanical growl that had no business out here in the quiet dark. I stepped out onto my porch, just as the first orange glow of sunrise lit the tree. And then I saw it, a bulldozer, crawling up the slope from the south trail, flanked by a white pickup with 2 large magnetic signs on either side that read, Lake Ridge Association, Enforcement Division. Behind the wheel of the dozer was a guy in a neon vest and hard hat, and standing next to the truck, arms crossed, bullhorn in hand, was Kara Templeton. I stared in disbelief. The dozer was heading straight for my shed. I sprinted down the slope, waving both arms and yelling, Hey, stop, that's private property. But the bulldozer didn't stop. It barely slowed. With a deafening crunch, it drove straight through the center of my shed, like it was made of cardboard. Steel panels buckled, my table saw, workbench, and every tool I owned. The operator finally cut the engine and hopped down like he'd just cleared a construction site. Kara, holding her bullhorn like a trophy, smiled as I approached. "Good morning, Mr. Ryland," she said brightly, as if we were neighbors discussing lawn care. "Consider this your final enforcement action. You were served proper notice." "Are you insane?" I barked. "That was my property. That's felony destruction." She raised an eyebrow and tapped her clipboard. "According to Lake Ridge Association bylaw, any unauthorized structures not brought into compliance within 30 days are subject to removal under emergency community preservation codes." "You made up those bylaws," I snapped. "This is rural land. There's no HOA jurisdiction here." Kara's smug smile didn't waver. "Actually, we've submitted our paperwork to the county development office. Provisional status is already in effect. That gives me full authority to take action against visual blight, fire code hazards, and non-permitted structures." "You're not a code officer," I said slowly. "You're not even a board member of anything real. This is my private land and you just committed a felony on camera." At that, she hesitated just for a second, but then she doubled down. "If you feel the need to report it," she said, turning on her heel, "please refer to our HOA legal liaison." I stood frozen, fists clenched at my sides, watching as she barked orders to the dozer operator and climbed into her truck. The machine was already backing out, dragging twisted metal and debris in its wake. I caught the moment her tires spit gravel across the boundary line. I stood there until the last engine noise faded. The smell of diesel and shredded pine filled the air. Then I turned and walked back to the wreckage. The roof of my shed had collapsed into itself. The slab was cracked. Most of my equipment was shattered tools I'd collected since my academy days. Irreplaceable gear, old gifts from retired buddies, gone. But Kara had made one mistake bigger than all the others. She assumed I was just another country homeowner, just another man who'd roll over or write a polite letter to the county. She didn't know the badge I kept locked in the top drawer of my nightstand. She didn't know my name was Deputy Chief Jake Ryland of the Millstone County Sheriff's Office. I wasn't just going to report this. I was going to make sure she learned what happens when you think fake power makes you untouchable. By mid-morning, the wreckage had been taped off with yellow marker ribbon. I didn't bother calling 911. I made one direct call to Sheriff Nolan, who picked up after the first ring. "She bulldozed it, Nolan," I said, without preamble. There was a pause on the line. The shed, like it was a haunted house. Driver in a rented cat. She was standing next to him with a clipboard like she was running code enforcement. "You're kidding me." I'm staring at my table saw in 2 pieces. "Wanna guess what else she hit?" Another pause. "You want me to send CSU?" I nodded to myself. "Yep, full photos, property damage. I'm pressing charges, and I want a trespass citation filed immediately." She crossed onto my land with machinery. "You got cameras?" he asked. "I got 6, with audio, front-to-back coverage." Nolan exhaled. "I'll send Ray and Jordan. Sit tight." 20 minutes later, 2 deputy cruisers pulled up the gravel slope. Deputy Ray, fresh off rotation from narcotics, let out a low whistle the second he stepped out. "What the hell happened here, right?" "Kara Templeton happened," I said, gesturing toward the mangled heap of metal that used to be my workshop. While Jordan snapped high-resolution photos of the tracks, Ray followed me inside where I played him the security footage. Kara was front and center in the frame, bullhorn in one hand, clipboard in the other, giving direct orders to the dozer operator. "She says she's got some kind of provisional HOA authority," I explained, "filed with the county. She thinks that gives her legal power to demolish private property without consent." Ray chuckled bitterly. "Didn't she get kicked off the Lakeside board 2 years ago for harassment?" "Yup, same woman. Only this time she made it official with signs and forms." Jordan returned from outside. "We found her tire treads. Clear trespass across your property line. Also, that dozer. It's rented from Colson Construction Rentals. Let's subpoena the rental contract," I said. "Get the name of the driver. I want him in for questioning, and I want Kara charged." Ray raised an eyebrow. "You want to stay hand?" "She brought this fight to my door, Ray. She picked the wrong property." By the next afternoon, we had the dozer operator Miguel Rojas in an interview room. His hands trembled as he answered questions. He was a subcontractor who got a job ticket from LRA enforcement with an address and instructions to remove a hazardous non-compliant structure. "I thought it was a code job," Miguel said. "She gave me the work order and said it was approved. I didn't know it was private land." "She never gave you any government ID?" I asked. He shook his head quickly. "Just her badge. Said she was part of a municipal subdivision. She had signs. A truck." I believed her. "Did you sign anything?" He nodded. "Work for a hire agreement. I kept a copy." "Good. I said, smiling for the first time that day. That'll help clear your name. He looked stunned. Wait, am I in trouble? Not if you cooperate, I said. And then we turned our full attention to Kara. I drove down to her address personally with Jordan in tow. We didn't wear uniforms. Didn't need to. Kara came to the door in a beige blouse, clearly expecting someone from the county board or another gullible homeowner. But when she opened the door and saw me, she froze. I held up a document, warrant to seize all HOA documentation and devices related to property enforcement activity. You're being investigated for criminal misrepresentation, destruction of property, and trespass. You can't. I stepped through the doorway. We can, and we will. Behind me, Jordan moved in with a search kit and bodycam rolling. For once, Kara Templeton had nothing to say. The sun had started to dip behind the hills when we loaded the last of Kara SC's documents into the back of my cruiser. Her Fuligor folder, labeled LRA Enforcement, Rural Div Region, 7 inches sat right on top. Inside, dozens of forged violation notices, color-printed inspection forms, even mock civil citations, none of them backed by any legal authority. She made her own ticket book, Jordan said, flipping through the carbon copies. She was issuing fines to homeowners. $50 for peeling paint, $75 for visible clotheslines, $100 for known HOA tool sheds. She created an entire fake government entity, I replied. This isn't just trespassing anymore, this is organized fraud. What disturbed me most wasn't just the scope of it, it was the names I recognized. At least 8 rural homeowners from the north side of the lake had signed and paid these so-called citations. Some had receipts. One even had a bounced check marked LRA Property Enforcement Unit. That night I sat down and drafted the initial report myself. If this was going to court, and it absolutely wouldn't, needed airtight documentation. Every forged form, every false signature, every photo of my destroyed shed. I logged it all. The next morning, I met with Sheriff Nolan in his office. This is a 10-layer cake of stupid, he muttered, thumbing through the evidence. She filed LLC paperwork. I told him. Lakeside Rural Authority. Registered it with the state and everything. Got a P.O. box. Fake business license. The works. All smoke and mirrors to look official. Nolan looked up. So, she created a shell corporation to impersonate a public regulatory body. Yep. She weaponized bureaucracy. He let out a long sigh. And bulldozed your shed to make a point. No. I corrected him, tapping the file. She bulldozed my shed to make a statement to the rest of the neighborhood. A warning. Nolan leaned back. I'll run it up the chain. County DA's gonna have a field day with this. That same afternoon, we posted a community notice on every public board within 20 miles of Lakeside. In it, we explained that the Lakeside Rural Authority was a non-governmental entity under criminal investigation. Anyone who had been fined, cited, or approached by Kara Templeton or her team was urged to come forward. And boy, did they. Over the next 48 hours, the sheriff's office was flooded with calls. People shared horror stories, lawn inspections without permission, verbal threats about property court, even demands to repaint their barns or remove American flags from porches. One elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Riggins, said they were told their doghouse violated structure height limits and were threatened with a $500 fine. She said she'd notify code enforcement. Mrs. Riggins told me over coffee. Said we'd get Leanne's. We paid her cash just to make it go away. Do you still have a receipt? I asked. Oh, we've got more than that, she said, pulling out a tiny voice recorder. We record everything since she first showed up last fall. The audio was gold. Kara's voice, clear as day, threatening to escalate things to legal channels. And referencing a board review. We added that to the growing evidence pile. Then came the kicker. Miguel, the bulldozer driver, gave us a second document, a printed email thread between him and Kara. In it, she explicitly claimed she had the sheriff's approval to clear non-compliant structures. I brought that straight to Nolan. That's impersonating law enforcement. He nodded grimly. Which makes it federal. We've forwarded the whole file to the state attorney general's office. The day Kara got arrested, the neighborhood practically celebrated. We brought her in quietly, no cuffs in front of the cameras. But the story had already spread. News vans started showing up at the edge of the community with mix in hand. Even the local paper ran the headline. Fake HOA president bulldozes cop's property now facing 12 felonies. But for me, it wasn't about headlines. It was about one thing. Accountability. And Kara Templeton had finally run out of lies to hide behind. By the time Kara's case hit the courtroom, Our small rural community had become ground zero for a storm of media attention. News outlets camped out by the sheriff's office, and even national morning shows began referring to her as the fake HOA president who bulldozed a cop's property. But none of the coverage captured the surreal feeling of watching her once so smug, so controlling, sitting on the other side of the courtroom in a beige county jail jumpsuit. She had lost everything: her position on the actual HOA board back in her suburban community, her job at a private legal firm, and her freedom. Her own neighbors, who once admired her commitment to property standards, now crossed the street when she came into view. The charges were serious: impersonation of law enforcement, fraudulent business operation, destruction of private property, unlawful fines and collection without legal authority, criminal trespass, coercion under false authority, 12 felony counts in total, and, thanks to the testimony from homeowners like the Rigganses, Miguel the bulldozer operator, and even her own email threads, the prosecution had everything they needed. When it was my turn to testify, I didn't dress in uniform. I wore jeans and a flannel shirt. I wanted the jury to see me not as a cop, but as a neighbor, as a homeowner, as someone just like them. My shed wasn't just a shed, I said calmly. It was the place I took my son fishing from. It's where I stored the rods my dad passed down to me. And one woman, with no authority, took that away because she couldn't stand not being in control. There was silence in the courtroom when I finished. Kara's lawyer tried to paint her as misguided, as someone passionate about community standards who got ahead of herself. But the jury didn't buy it. They came back unanimous, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in state prison, with restitution owed to every homeowner she defrauded, including full reimbursement to me for the shed demolition, all property damage, and legal fees. She also received a 10-year ban from serving on any HOA board or filing LLCs in the state of Texas. The irony: the very laws Kara pretended to enforce became the ones that destroyed her. But the final twist came a few weeks after sentencing, when I got a knock at my cabin door. It was Miguel, the bulldozer driver. He held a set of blueprints in his hands and a small envelope. "This is for you," he said, "from the Lakeside Homeowners Fund. We took up a collection. A bunch of us chipped in." Inside the envelope was a check just over $14,000. He unrolled the blueprints. "It's a new shed. Custom. We talked to a contractor. Cedar siding. Finished interior solar roof. You'll have more than a shed, you'll have a memory cabin." I stood there, completely stunned. "Why?" I asked. Miguel smiled. "Because you fought back when we couldn't. You stood up to someone who made all of us feel small. This isn't just to rebuild your shed, it's to remind us we're not powerless." Construction began that same weekend. I helped, of course. My son helped paint the inside, and my wife insisted we add a hammock on the porch. We even carved a small plaque above the door: "The real authority, freedom, truth, and cedar." Kara Templeton never came back to Lakeside. Rumor has it she moved 3 counties over and changed her last name. I doubt she'll be filing any HOA citations anytime soon. As for me, I got more than revenge. I got my peace back. I got my community back. And every time I walk into that shed, I am reminded that the loudest people with the biggest threats aren't always the ones with the real power. Sometimes, it's just a guy with a badge, a busted up shed, and neighbors who refuse to be pushed around ever again.